When I was about 23, I think I said to him, you know, you are a really distinctive cameraman, and I think you could make a living as a photographer. And he said to me, oh no, I'm a writer. I said, okay, but I'm just telling you that your work is really good. And I said, I'd manage you. We could really run a business. And no.
He was more successful in his approach than any photographer has been in bringing to bear the personal connections. His relationship with the subject's own personality, and I think you can see them as human beings in a way that very, very few other people do.
The images, the way that he presented jazz, has a lot to do with the general public perception as to what jazz is. The coolness of it, the hipness of it, the mystery, the dynamics of it.
He loved the taking of the pictures, and he loved getting it right and getting the proper feeling and emotion out of the picture. And that is his great contribution to the history of jazz, because the history of jazz is contained in those pictures.
He can communicate the meaning of a moment in an image. Only the greatest photographers have that ability. So there's something that happened way back in another time, you feel like you were there.
The great photographers of jazz are those who can catch that quality of jazz, which is a motion within the framework of a kind of fixed time. And it's that tension between motion and beat that is caught in Gottlieb's photography.
Bill Gottlieb took photos of famous people. They were pop stars. That's why they were published then. That's why Bill Gottlieb wanted to get their photos. And now, the fact that Bill's photographs exist allows them to remain icon figures in the 21st century.
Who's Billie Holiday? Look at Bill's shots. Who's Charlie Parker? Look at Bill's shots.
I was in my, end of my sophomore year at college, Lehigh University, and the fraternity where I was served this improperly cooked pork. About 2 days later, it was the end of the regular school year, we scattered, each to our respective homes, and several of us came down with trichinosis. And I ended up spending the summer recuperating in bed. My most constant visitor during this time was a fellow who collected jazz records. So while I was recuperating, he played recordings mostly of Duke Ellington and Louis Armstrong. Very good choices. By the time I got out of bed, I was a jazz nut. I was at that time the editor of the college magazine, so I saw to it that there were a number of articles about jazz in the magazine, most of which I wrote. My first job out of college was with the Washington Post in a fairly conventional position, but I really wanted to get as much writing done as possible. And I talked the managing editor into letting me write in this weekly jazz column in the Sunday edition.
It was a very erudite column for those years, in the sense that he knew much more about jazz music than most people who wrote columns about pop music, because it was basically a pop music column.
He's a superb writer, there's no question about that. But jazz journalism in general, it's a knotty field. There's not a lot of great writing in it. It was often written for the moment, and there was a publicity angle there.
I had also acquired a 3-a-week disc jockey show on a local station and a 1-a-week show on the local NBC outlet. This was an era when Life magazine was at its zenith. And all of us aspiring journalists wanted to have a lot of photo illustrations, and I certainly wanted that. I tried to talk the editor into letting me have a photographer go around with me when I interviewed people for the column. That went on for about 2 weeks, and he said, "Kid, it's too expensive." But I was determined to have those illustrations, so I went out and, at my own expense, bought a speed graphic, which is what all the big boys used.
In those days, you didn't have those nice little, portable or digital cameras. You had a big speed graphic with a clumsy flash arrangement and so on.
Photography today is very much zap, zap, zap. Let's go back, and then we go back home, look at them later and see if we got anything good. Bill belongs to an era in which we're going to get this. You don't just zap. You wait until that moment comes and you nail it.
You can be patient and wait for that moment of, or that, these great shots where that thing happened. And that can only come from somebody who's really listening. I mean, I don't know anything about cameras, but I assume, there has to be some forethought.
The eye way in the middle of your head knows it's there. You may not be aware while you're doing it, but Bill's pictures don't happen by accident. We all take one good picture sooner or later, but you don't take them one after the other, day after day, the way Bill did.
You have to have the sense that something's about to happen to be prepared to take that photo. You can't go, oops, and then you'd have the world's greatest collections of the moments after the great moment, which is probably what you see in most jazz photographs, or in most photographs of anything.
See, we were early. That's the whole point. I mean, Bill was taking these pictures when nobody knew much about any of this stuff, or cared about it particularly.
His pictures are storytelling devices. He's able to create the illustration of a picture's worth 1,000 words.